Welcome back. Here we are at this beautiful forest with our cicada friends singing, crickets, frogs, birds, everybody's here. And here we are for part 3 of our forest teachings. And I wanted to share with you today a conundrum that I found myself in that the forest answered for me as a result of having a relationship with the forest, as I shared in part 1. So this actually came up as feeling trouble in my heart. I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was late last year, I don't remember. But basically, a client and close friend of mine was talking with me one day, and she said something like, I met somebody who, without me bringing you up, they brought you up, and they said, who does Anastasia think she is? Acting like she knows something about medicine, referring to ayahuasca, and about the teachings of the jungle and whatnot, because she's never had a plant diet, and she's even said that, and here she is saying that she sees and feels so much. Because if you're not new to this journey with me, I've been posting online for about 4 years on multiple platforms about my experiences with plant medicine. So I lived in Peru for 1.5 years, and that's what I was doing. I was drinking medicine. And right away from the first ceremony, I had an extremely deep sense of familiarity with Mother Ayahuasca. Like, it was so familiar and felt so much like home to me. I was like, why would I ever want to leave? You know, I started off in a retreat, and in our third ceremony, our curandera was like, so either you can drink a little bit to kind of close down this cycle with medicine before you go home, or you can drink a little bit more and you can more so open your connection with Mother Ayahuasca. And so I chose to drink more. And at the end of the ceremony, I remember everybody's crying, like all our retreat participants. We're just like so touched by the healing we went through. So thankful to our curandera. And then I was crying too. But when I heard what other people were crying about, I was confused, because they were crying and they were saying, I can't wait to get back to my family. I miss them so much. I'm so happy to return to them. And I'm looking around and I'm like, you're crying because you want to leave? I was like, I'm crying. There's a forest spirit here. I don't know if you heard that. Somebody's hanging out with us, observing. Hello. Good thing I made my offering before I came here, right? Asked for permission to be here, safe and sound in a harmonious way. So anyways, I was like, I'm crying because I don't ever want to leave this medicine. I was like, this is like the first place that I ever really truly felt like home in my life. Like, this medicine, I get it, you know? And so the more I worked with medicine, the more I would just like connect with plants. Like, they would come connect with me and teach me about them. They would give me songs. They would give me icaros. And then I was confused, actually, because the first time I received an icaro from a plant, I sat there and I went, what? I was like, I didn't diet this plant. I was like, I never even went to the jungle. You know, I was in the Sacred Valley, which is like a long flight away from the jungle in Peru. And so initially I felt confused, and I shared with some people about it. And then some people are like, oh yeah, that can happen. You know, you got a connection with the plants. But then that person came into my awareness and they had said, like, you know, who does Anastasia think she is? Where does she say she gets this knowledge from? Blah, blah, blah. And when I heard that, I was like, wait a second. They actually kind of have a point. I was like, I feel like I should be upset about them, like, saying things like this about me. But at the same time, I was like, I understand where they're coming from. Why do I have this connection? You know, I'm like looking around at the forest like, literally, where did this come from and how? I was 22 years old when I started drinking ayahuasca, and I was like, there are people who've been drinking for 20 years, and they come to me for help. And I don't mean that to show off. I really mean that. You know, there are plenty of medicine people who've come to me for help, like readings and healings and things. And it's not really about me, but I was like, why? Why does this channel through me? Okay, so I went out to the forest, and I was like, I'm going to ask the spirit of the forest directly. I'm going to ask the Creator God directly, because I want my answer from here, not from up here, right? So I went out and I told them, hey, this person said this thing about me. And I feel kind of confused and upset because I'm like, actually, how did this happen? I don't understand. Can you share something with me about that? Okay, and then so next time I go in the forest and it starts to make sense. And here's how it goes. Here's what I received. So ayahuasca comes from the jungle, which is a tropical forest. It's a forest that's in a warmer climate. Yes, there are special traditions and things that this medicine comes from that I do not come from. I'm not Shipibo by blood. I'm not Huni Queen, anything like that. I'm not Yawanawa. But here is the thing. The language of the forest is the same all around the world. So if I have family from Russia who comes from the forest, and these are our teachings, these are our traditions, this is what we know. This is what's ingrained in our DNA to be familiar with and have a sense of kinship with. Then when I connect to a medicine that's from the jungle, from the Amazon, that's like a cousin of the forest that my relatives come from. We might not be speaking the exact same local dialect, but there's still an understanding, because guess what? There's a keeper of the forest in both of these cultures, both in Russia and in the jungle. You have spirits who take care of and protect the forest, and guess what? Hi, dragonfly. There are also a lot of tricksters. You know, not everywhere, but like the spirit of the forest can be a trickster spirit, because you'll hear both in Peru and in Russia. You know, in Peru, we call it chuyachaki, and that is a word that means dissimilar feet, because he's a forest spirit who is a guardian of the forest, but also he has two different feet. They say one foot is like backwards, or maybe he has one foot is a goat hoof and the other is a human foot. And they're like, that's how you know it's the keeper of the forest. And if you disrespect the forest and Chuyachaki comes and takes care of that and sets that straight, probably how you'll know it's him is you'll hurt your foot. One foot, one ankle, you'll hurt it. That's like his mark. You know how it is in Russia? We call that spirit Leshy. It's the same thing. He's the keeper of the forest. He's the guardian of the forest. He's the protector of the forest. And you know what? He could be pretty mighty and scary if he needs to be, if you have disrespected the forest. Because guess what? He might do the same exact thing to you. He might hurt your foot. He might mislead you and get you lost. You might see a little light in the forest that you think is somebody's flashlight. You go follow it, and suddenly you're in a place you've never been before, and you're like, where am I? Very, very, very similar parallels. And then we also have these same parallels in just many other cultures. I'm just giving these two as an example because they're very familiar to me. So when Chuyachaki started connecting to me in medicine, initially I was confused and I said, why? I don't get it. Actually, the way I heard about that was one of my friends who died at Chuyachaki came to me after a ceremony she shared, and she said, hey, Chuyachaki came to me and said he wants to work with you. And I was like, what? Isn't that kind of like a tough spirit to work with? I was like, I don't know about that, because I heard he was really challenging. Well, guess what? I have been working with him because I was having dreams about the spirit of the forest. And that's who I work with when I come out here. So finally that started to make sense. I went, oh, okay. And then we have various other types of water spirits. We have serpent spirits. We have different birds. We have different beings. And all over, if you look into these traditions, like when I look into the traditions that come from Russia, they parallel the traditions of the Shipibo people. And they don't always look the same, but a lot of those spirits are similar. There are entheogenic medicines that do not contain DMT. They contain other medicines. And one medicine that I'm working with locally that grows right here in Pennsylvania, it's called Ghost Pipe. It's an entheogenic medicine. It's a consciousness expanding medicine. It does not contain anything psychoactive that we know of. But why is it every time I take this medicine and I go out into the forest, I have an entheogenic experience? You know, why is that? So just because we have a medicine that contains DMT and is a certain way doesn't mean that that's the only medicine on planet Earth that has that kind of spirit. Ayahuasca is very different from spirit plant from Ghost Pipe, but they carry a lot of parallels. And the more I understand Ghost Pipe, the more I understand ayahuasca. The more I understand this forest right here in Pennsylvania, the more the jungle makes sense to me. So what I eventually learned and realized was that my foundation came from the forest. Oh, come on. Look at that. Oh, you missed it. There's a purple dragonfly. He landed on my hand. Hello, beautiful. It's good to have you here today. I love this guy. He's on my thigh. So, anyways, with myself being like raised by the forest, this is truly who raised me. I grew up in these forests. I grew up seeing the spirits of the forest. This has been since day one for me. So with that mental split that I had coming into Peru, I had that assumption that I was like, oh, ayahuasca is brand new to me. The jungle is brand new to me. I don't know anything about anything. On one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, I just wasn't seeing an expanded perspective. I wasn't seeing that they are related. They're not the same. But because I feel a deep sense of familiarity with these plants, it makes sense to me that these plants talk. It makes sense when these plants give me a song. They have been since I was very small. It makes sense that these plants communicate, that they're living, that they're individual beings, that they have personalities and individual traits, and that they're on their own process of evolution and growth. So it makes sense to me, based on what my spirit understands, that I would have these experiences in plant medicine, right? So it's not so much about me knowing something about ayahuasca, but it's just something that makes sense to me based on what my spirit already knows. This is a community, this forest. This is not just trees and dirt and bugs and things. This is a family. And when you work with the forest, you get to know many different spirits and their purposes, and you learn communication. So if you get very familiar with the forest where you are, and you open-heartedly open that communication, it would make sense that talking to any other forest would be much easier for you, and that you have that sense of empathy for the forest, and you have that compassion, and you have that understanding, and you go, yeah, I hear your voice. It's just family by a different look, right? So that's why, even though I haven't drank ayahuasca in a few years, I don't feel called. I've been sitting with traditions here in North America. I'm still working with all of these medicines just by working with this forest. And it's the same for you and anybody else. So it's like, if you want to work with Mother Ayahuasca and maybe you're a few years away from going to a retreat and doing that, you can start your education right here. This is where your education starts. This is who you want to talk to first. This is where you want to go. Work with what's right here. Get to know the trees, get to know their medicines, get to know their names, their personalities, get to know what they're used for, get to know how they like to be harvested and utilized. What do you make tea with? What do you make a poultice with? What do you make a tincture with? What do you dry out and put under your pillow for protection? What goes in your protection bag, that you wear on your body, whether it's around your neck or it's on a belt or you put it in your pocket? Which plants go in that? So you can approach the forest with these questions, and the forest will help you find those answers. Right now I'm looking at a bunch of goldenrod because it seems like the most abundant plant this year is goldenrod. So that's a really great sign that I felt called to work with goldenrod and learn about that plant. So anyways, that's just how I see things. And I'll talk to you soon.